Hello, my friends. Been a little under the weather the last week. I know we've been off live, but getting better, getting back to it. We'll get Jon on here in a second. Got a lot of questions this week. Some kind of bigger topics to potentially dig into. I see Jon on there right away, so let me just grab him. We're back in the saddle. How you doing, man?
Yes. Doing all right.
You've been mixing like crazy. You've been cooking up a storm.
Been mixing and cooking, chilling, feeling good. Have a new perspective on attempting to find. This is going to probably sound like really cliche to most people, but find happiness and fulfillment outside of mixing records. Because I've realized to myself that we should probably actually talk about this. I think this happened during our off week, but I should probably be, I guess, maybe transparent about a year plan or strategy that I chose to do with my manager, and a reflection post the findings of the strategy, which was basically say no to anything that isn't at my full rate, so I can get some free time and learn what it's like to have some free time, and be okay with making less money to see how it felt to have free time and do less things, like be able to maybe travel more and go out of town on a weekend and not really stress about this. And when the accounting came through at the end of the year, I made just slightly more money and mixed like less than half the output that I was doing. And so financially speaking, it was a successful experiment. But what I really realized when reflecting on it was that I was not as happy last year, because I wasn't developing new talent. I wasn't exposing myself to things that weren't at just basically the price point, or a little less depending on like the amount of songs, and just kind of sticking to the money aspect of it, not fully, but mostly. And that idea of saying no more than yes, that we've talked about quite a bit, and just trying to be a living experiment of things that I've said out loud. Like, it would be an ideal situation to be able to say no more than yes. I don't really think I was as happy. So I've spent the last 2 weeks kind of reflecting on that information and realizing that I just want to work, just say yes. Like, this is what I've been doing for, most of my life, and I love it so much, and it should never really be about the money. And not that it was, but I just wanted to see what it was like to just not say yes to everything and always be working. And then another thing I thought about during the on this reflection was that a lot of the times when I wasn't mixing, I was being busy with making my own tracks, beat making, producing, getting involved with things like that. And then when the pandemic happened, I stopped doing that. So I think there's a hole there that I was able to fill and kind of distract myself from maybe the lack of some mix work happening last year, with like, wow, I can go out, I can go be social with my friends, my girlfriend, and I think I just love making music. I think that's really the consensus.
That's a good thing to realize, and it sounds like a very successful experiment in the aggregate, to understand what that feels like. I mean, that we talk about this a lot, and people ask, should I do this? Should I do that? Should I specialize? Should I do? And what I realized pretty early on is I don't often run into that problem because I do so many different things. I was actually talking to a producer yesterday he's actually one of my favorite artists. This artist, he went by Aaron Cartier, now Callie Cartier, and he's an amazing artist and makes his own videos and has released tons of music and sort of lives in that hyperpop world, but is also an incredible producer outside of it. And he and I were kind of talking about, I'm starting to bring him in on a few things in sort of my more like pop world, pop for lack of a better term, just not kind of like subculture underground stuff. He's like, his talent is immense. And so we're just kind of playing around. We were talking about that, and I was saying, I was trying to give him some perspective on kind of like the industry major label production for hire thing. And really it kind of, as I was talking to him, talking about like, I really enjoy doing that, like get the call, we've got a week, finish the production and the mix, and everybody's in crisis and everybody's freaking out and everybody thinks they're super far apart, but they're just details, but it's just been such a crazy long process. Sort of in a similar place, which you get a lot as a mixer. I love that place as a producer finisher, yeah. But I also love just hanging out for a day and doing whatever the fuck we want, or doing it for a week. I've started to do that more at this new house, having like people like Bobby Bracken's over and Nick Knack and Emma Rosen were here last week. And just like days where we don't have any agenda, we're just making stuff. So I need both of those. If I just do the finishing, crisis, major label, money, negotiate a deal quickly, what are the delivery requirements, what are we just solving the puzzle, I would go insane because I don't get my art stuff off. But if I just do the free expression, make sounds, then I feel like I don't really have any structure. And I like, I need both of those things. And I realized that early on in my career, I think. And I think everybody has versions of that. I mean, even if you really love what you're doing, it will feel like a job if you do it the same way all the time. And so I think it's really great that you're finding that. What do you feel like you are going to do in that non-full rate mixing major label time? Are you going to make some more tracks? Are you going to make the long-awaited Jon Castelli solo trap record? What are we getting into?
Yeah, the long-awaited that is 27 tracks, unreleased tracks deep. So I could drop any day. That's light work because I'm enlisting.
It's a 36-song album. Chris Brown's doing a 74-song. It's like 27 is nothing, bro.
Yeah. 27 is nothing. Yeah, I'm just saying that's like halfway done. You know what I mean? Like I'm announcing it now. It's 54, and you're executive producing it, and you're mixing it. I can't. Oh my God, that's amazing! I would pay to hear John's ad libs a lot.
Yeah, I definitely
that is so
mix,
funny.
And they're going to be unintended mixes, by the way. I'm going to mix them. You don't get to look over my shoulder. No,
I don't even get to listen. No approval. Yeah. So let's talk about. I got a lot to talk about today, and I'm sure we have some questions to answer. But to answer your first question, I think I want to get involved earlier with people like I used to. Not necessarily care about the rate, but also like. Look, I have a price point that I'm not willing to go below, but it's based on I don't want to devalue peers of mine and at a place that I am. Because if it's below a certain threshold, it should be given to someone younger, a protege of mine, or a friend, or someone. We just have to. I think we have to keep valuing ourselves in a certain place. But that's another thing. I'm going to fill my schedule with developing things and helping other people finish records that maybe there is some sort of equity compensation rather than upfront fee, and just rethink the way that a mixer can be involved and be more accessible. I think that's the strategy with my manager this year, as well as obviously the full rate conversation and keeping busy doing things like that, because I love high stakes. But like this Ray album and the Ray hit that's out, I didn't, it's an independent artist. They weren't able to come up with my whole rate. Like, let's be honest about that. And I have a hit with it. Like, that's so exciting. There's so much more to the potential of saying yes to an artist that you believe in for whatever reason, her story, her voice, her producer, everything about it. Like, that was an obvious yes to me than the fee, like there's obviously negotiations that take place. So my point of being transparent about that is really just when someone is sitting thinking of what they should say yes and no to, weigh the variables. Like a lot of the podcasts that we all listen to are dissections of someone that spent hours, days, weeks, months reading through studies or interviews and making a more digestible version of, like, that's why we're on this conversation thread, which is like, hey, I've done this experiment, like you can do your own version of it, but no, it's about the music first, right? That's why I'm sharing that information. I'm going to just do more mixing. I don't really want to make tracks anymore. Like, every now and then I think about it. I think I would jump in and finish something if a friend of mine that's a producer said, hey, I think you're the right person to take this over the edge. Maybe I'd get involved. Other than that, I have no desire to produce records, really. So that being said, there was another thing I want to talk about.
I'm I assume you agree on this, but give me your thoughts if not. Um, as someone who's had sort of both of these situations, it is a great thing to have, like, you know, single number 3 on big artist or cut on big artist's album, have some success that way. It's much more satisfying to be involved with something before it blows up, and you get to be involved with that young, hungry, early process, and then it gets big. It's a much better feeling because you're and also because there's a lot of reasons for that, but one of them is you get that feeling that we all have sometimes. Many of us, you know, we battled it, but like that feeling of being young and hungry, because that's where a lot of the best stuff gets made. And so to be involved with projects that have that energy and nobody knows about it, and then they blow up, is the most exciting thing. It's way more satisfying.
Man, I'm still all about
it's the most
that.
Fun.
Right? That's exactly what you're saying is it's the most fun. I even think that it transfers to, like, on another thing, you know, I was involved with an artist early on in their career, and I think we talked about this, and then they left me when they got success, and they went to work with one of the biggest engineers in the world, and then they came back to me for this third album, and I'm stoked, and I'm working on it. We're about to deliver the first single. They're coming over today to do more mixes, the whole team. And I woke up this morning, I went to the gym, and I was like, damn, I think I can make this a little bit better. You know, just like I got a new plugin that I like that I'm messing around with, and I was like, oh, wait, I got this after this mix, and this is about to drop. Like, let's jump back in. Let's just make sure this is as good. Like, it's already approved on their end, theoretically. I'm just like, I think it could be a little bit better, and it's on my end. And I'm
You're
like,
excited about it.
Like, that's what it's all about. It's really not just saying,
yeah.
I'm excited about it. So I think that's the key, is whether it's new artist development all the way up to A-list, they've already have hits, and maybe you're now getting a chance to work with. I think we should say yes to the things that get us most excited. And I think that's where the best fruits of our labor
also why
transpire.
We talk so much when people are like, how do I ascend in my career? And the answer is always make the best things with the people around you. It's not just that's where the opportunity is, but that's really where the most satisfying stuff is going to come from. And it doesn't mean that like you and your buddy can't all of a sudden be the next go-to for the huge artist, but the way you get there is by making the great stuff with your friends. I mean, that's how the vast majority of people blow up in their careers. They make great stuff with the people around them. It's the most satisfying. Yeah. It's how you do the best work. It's how you're going to get the most excitement when you're making things. It's all of that.
Let's talk about this question that was just asked. Is the new plugin the CLA 2A? The answer to that is no, but I did try it once, and I left it on an acoustic guitar. That being said, I want to just briefly touch on this thing, and I want to have an episode designated to, at some point, to you and I, talking about every plugin that I don't use and that I'm going to use it, because I was so opinionated last year on all the things I don't use, and not like hating on everything except for the Oak Sound stuff, which we've regained focus on after talking to them, and I use it a lot. But every time I say I don't, like, out loud to an engineer or a producer that I don't use something, I'm going to use it. So we should do an episode where you bring up plugins that I don't use anymore, and then you force me to say I don't use that plugin, and then I have to go use it on a song.
Yeah,
and see if I can make it
stick. Plugins that are bad. They all just, it's all how you use it, right? I use the
yeah. The new plugin I'm talking about is a compressor, though, and I am compressing, and I'm noticing in certain compressors they narrow the image, and I don't like that, right? And that's what I notice on most plugin compressors. They narrow the image, and then you have to work really hard to get things to sound wide again. And I don't like having to work hard to make things sound wide, because if you pan something 100% to one side and 100% to the other in a proper arranged record, it should feel wide. So there should be nothing in the way of widening a record without, like, maybe subtle imaging on certain things and certain frequency ranges. Like, that stuff's all cool. Like, you can image, and I'm not against that. There's a certain point where I think you go too far and it gets phasey and feels weird, but those tools are cool. Though, if you compress properly, which I'm learning to re-instantiate my love for the compressor, I do like what it does to the extremities of a record. Things that may get a little lost. If you hit it just right, the threshold just right, it can bring up these little magical tickly things that you might not notice otherwise, but they are there. And I'm learning how to regain my back wall, where I actually like leaving it a bit dreamier and far behind, where you have to lean into a record. I don't think society at this point is leaning into records like maybe we used to certain extent. So I don't want to make everything so obscure in the back wall that I talk about a lot. So I've been compressing just enough to bring that back wall a little bit forward, and it's actually giving me a cool sensation that I can stand behind.
So whatever. I had a question for you. Yeah. I was listening to a bunch of records, just like listening to a bunch of references and some new music. There's so much like stereoizing of lead vocals these days. I don't know if we've specifically talked about this. You know, I love the sound of a very clear mono vocal, and obviously like, you know, verbs and throws and whatever. Yeah. But it seems like the high end of so many vocals, and I don't think it's necessarily just like the track is using like, you know, that the ozone widener, and you put up the high end and everything just kind of gets phasey and wide and shiny. It feels like it's very much on the lead vocal. Do you know what people, what is that tactic? Is there a consistent thing that people are doing to make that? I mean, I do lots of things like like very light delay, H3000 stuff, do a little like, you know, a very short reverb, like Valhalla, small ambient space. There's all kinds of different tricks to just like add wideness to vocal. Yeah. But I feel like there's some kind of like high-end widening thing that everybody's doing. Yeah, the Serban thing people are talking about. Do you know what that is or how people are doing that? Or I don't know that I love it most of the time actually, but I mean a lot now.
Yeah. My guess on if people want to call something a Serban thing would probably be the actual waves doubler. That's what I've heard he uses a lot. It's probably in parallel. I'm sure it's not on the vocal, but that's not what you're talking about, where the high end only is happening.
To me. It may be the whole thing.
Yeah, but I think that's happening. Like, have you ever listened to just for personal reference, have you ever listened to a mix of mine and felt this?
I don't think so, or not nearly as extreme as what I'm thinking about. I'll have to go back and listen. But like when I listen to because to me, some of you mix a lot of great stuff. Like the Ray record doesn't have it. The Khalid stuff doesn't have what I'm hearing. It may be on other things. I don't think the Leroy About You has it. I mean, they do.
No, I started doing this stuff later, but it would be on the Ray record, because I actually think the top end, I definitely do a subtle overall widening on the top end from like, but it's like 8K mix. And up. On the whole mix, it's very subtle, and I do it a lot on the background vocals to get that away from the lead to maintain that mono. I'd imagine people are using the ozone imager, on the lead vocal bus that they have. I've noticed it. I don't mind it when it's subtle, but when it gets too much, it starts to, because then the S's and the airiness is spread. And it tricks your ears on AirPods. I think if you do it very subtly, it actually creates a bigger space for the vocal, and it can be unnoticeable. I think it's actually a really cool tool to use. But if maybe it's too far down, maybe the preset someone is using is like more 4 or 5K, and you just have to notice it more. I think if it's only in the air, quote unquote, range,
sort of like 8K and above,
you'll notice it less. But honestly, 8K and above, and if you're like less than 10, like 10% on the slider. I mean, it goes up to like 200, I think. Like sometimes people have it at 40, and as soon as I press play, I feel it, and it usually goes to the right side for whatever reason they're compensating, and I have to stop playback. It's like so aggressive. So if it's on the track, I could tell, but if it's printed, there's nothing I can do. It's fucking weird. Like sometimes I'll actually split the mono and I'll EQ the right side a little bit darker and then recommit it to a stereo track to work on, because it's so aggressive. It's really unfortunate when that happens, but those times around, I would say it's probably the CLA, the spread within the CLA vocal plugin. That was my first gut. People started talking about other things. I think the Serban thing is less CLA and probably the imager thing, and actually waves double or in parallel. I think that's probably more so. Someone is saying that they use the H3000 subtle. I do that a lot. That's actually probably that's my go-to. A high pass H3000.
it's a much more.
It's a different effect than what. Yeah, exactly.
Spread thing. It's interesting.
Yeah. My guess is it's the ozone imager, and it's the frequency is a little too low and it's a little too aggressive, because let's go back to one of our main conversations we touched back a lot on, which is bad monitoring. If you don't have good monitoring, you're not going to notice. It's funny,
when I got my
tweeters are so
PMC 228s. I hear some of those mixes and they just kind of go like, whoosh, and I'm like, whoa, okay, yikes, that's a lot.
You can, yeah. So if you can't hear it, our brains are waiting for the effect. It's like, I put a plugin on and I want to hear what it's doing. If if you can't notice it and it's above 10 on the ozone thing, you're already too far, is what I would say.
Yeah. Oh, this is why we do this, because I just get to ask you questions.
Yeah, but I like I don't want to, again, these are things like I want to talk about. I want to talk about negatives a little bit less this year with you, because I can really harp on my whole concept is I think a lot of things do more harm than good a lot of the time, and I think that these things have really useful. There's times when it's great. Also, there's a certain like
too much of a good thing. How much do we want to use it? That's, I think, an interesting conversation for sure.
And I should talk about like the reason why I wanted to use that CLA 2A plugin is because I was talking to my friend Nathan Phillips, who's a up and coming, really amazingly talented mix engineer, works with Omar Apollo, assisted for Jeff Ellis for quite a minute. And when he asked me about that plugin, he and I said I didn't use it. He's like, well, it's probably the worst compressor plugin, but that's why I like it, because some really janky sounding records, like we're using that almost exclusively. And if someone says, hey, I want that thing, well, that's the thing. So there's no other way to make that thing happen except for that way. And if someone wants that thing, I should understand what that thing is and have that in my arsenal. I don't want to be above anything. I might want to be above a certain plugin on the regular and not want to use that to do something subtle. But if someone says, hey, I want that guitar sound from Blonde, it's like, well, maybe that's like, if that was the plugin on it and that's causing all the mayhem and like the timing is getting fucked up by this really slow released fake version of an LA2A, you're not going to get that with a real LA2A. You're not going to get it with a Faraday limiter. You're not going to get it with, a good Hertz thing. You're not going to get it with anything but the thing that did that. And I think that's cool to remember. Like, we studied, now I'm thinking out loud, I haven't really thought about this, but we studied the compressors, EQs, saturation boxes of Beatles records, of old time records, 80s effects, like to understand what effect did that thing that we liked on records. Maybe it's okay to understand the shitty plugin that created the sound that someone might still want from 2008, right? Like, that is going to be a reference point again. So I feel like I should be studied on all, like the OTT, right? That was such a sound for so long. People are still using it 10%, 8%.
Because it does
50%. Yeah, I haven't in a while. It does a thing. I don't want to be against that being on the mix bus and then like taking it off for the sake of me not liking it or respecting it. That doesn't make any, that's like, that's the last year. Castelli mixing. Like, I don't want to do that.
And everybody, I think, should always think about when having these discussions is that at some point in the 1950s, when people were electrifying guitars and had pickups, at some point a number of people did the wrong thing, turned it up way too loud, and it got all this terrible distortion that's not how these things were designed, and then it became the sound of rock and roll. So don't be precious about things not being good or being shitty or great, or it's what they do and what you want to use it for. We're just making art and expressing ourselves, and don't be precious about this shit. Like the Sinatra hated rock and roll. Sinatra hated rock and roll because it was music made by amateurs. Like, and he's right.
Yeah.
But it doesn't make rock and roll any less awesome. Like,
it makes it more accessible and more easily understood. That's some heady jazz record. You know what I mean? It's like, I love a heady jazz record, but I also love a fucking trap record that loops the same four things forever. Like, what's wrong with any of this?
Let's get a couple of quick questions. Matt asked, John mentioned mixing on headphones. There's been a lot of headphone discussion on the Discord. There are a few headphone questions. was actually talking to my buddy Moon Willis the other day about what's a good pair of closed back headphones for airplanes. By the way, we discovered that if you get the AirPod Maxes, which have, I think, the best noise cancellation of anything I've heard, I'm sure there's other great ones too, but they're phenomenal. You know, the over the ear, they cancel tons of noise, and the battery lasts forever. If you actually get the cable that connects them, you know, they're Bluetooth, but if you connect the cable, then there's no latency. So you can actually use.
I have that cable. They sound out of phase to me with the cable, and that freaks me out. I don't know why.
With your cable or your headphones, because
I bought that cable
because it works perfectly for me, and I've been using that. And you can use the noise cancellation and the cable, so you have no latency. They sound great. So that's what
so sick.
and I were talking about. But
bummer that I just bought these Grados, because that's all I only want to use. I want to travel with one pair of headphones, and I actually really like the way that those headphones sound.
Which ones?
They're very comfortable.
The AirPod Maxes.
No, the AirPod Maxes. They're so comfortable. They sound great. That's what I want to listen to a podcast on. So if I want to go from the plane and listen to a podcast and then jump over to work, I should just be able to carry one pair of headphones. So I'm actually like really excited you just said that, because I have the cable in a drawer. I'm going to go look for it.
The other thing is there's lots of, like somebody says, Slate VSX. I haven't used a bunch of these other ones. And the headphones that sound the best to me for like stereo image and mixing are all open back, for all the reasons that open back.
Yes,
right? But you can't, it's so much harder to use those remotely because they're loud and they
almost sound too good though. A lot of the times these open back, my Grados, to me, when I put them on even in my studio, because I'm trying to understand headphones, I just did this yesterday. I put them on, I'm doing a mix, and I'm like, I don't know. I don't know that I like this. It's just like, it almost sounds endless. Like there's just so much space. And I don't know. I hate headphone mixing. So to be honest, I'm not a good reference point for this. Like but when I hear music, wanting to do it, and I think I would pick the AirPod Maxes over my like expensive Grados that I just bought.
I think with all this stuff, if you get a very good pair of headphones that will not like, regardless of the quality and the frequency response and whatever, if you get a pair that you can use in a lot of different places, I think you just got to get used to it. It's a different, they're not going to sound like speakers.
That's all it is.
And it's a different thing, and you have to get used to it. I don't know. I've been essentially remote for the last year and a half and tried a bunch of different pairs of headphones, and it's just really, I ended up mostly using the Audio-Technica M50s that everybody has, that I have all over the studio, because I'm just used to them. They're easy. Right. They can take a beating. They're closed back. I think I'm going to switch mostly to the AirPod Maxes when I'm traveling, if I want to edit on a plane or do some sound design stuff. I mean, the other big problem with airplanes is that you get all of that low mid rumble. As I was talking to Moon about this as well, he's like, all my stuff ends up sounding way too bright because you're trying to compensate for all this extra rumble and all this craziness happening. So I think the answer for me is I'm just going to use the AirPod Maxes, but I'm also not trying to mix on an airplane. I don't think.
Yeah, finalize records on the airplane.
That do headphone mixing, and that's great. And again, we've talked about this before, but guys like Skrillex were making some of their best work. I think with
crazy sounding records,
which are not even sounding at all. But he just got his thing dialed, and you can kind of get used to anything. If you are making the music, I think if you are a mixer doing lots of different genres, boy, is it going to be tough when you get tracks that are different from different producers, recorded in different environments and different intention. If you're making your own stuff, I don't think it matters nearly as much, which is mostly what I'm doing. So I don't know. Totally. I don't know if that's a good answer for the headphone thing.
I never really thought about this, but I wonder with that Skrillex stuff, that like Bangarang, for example, like if it's made a lot of the way on these headphones that have like that bass bump, if he's like multi-band compressing, which was I guess the thing, the OTT kind of stemmed from that, and he's controlling that low end so it's tolerable. Like that's how that shit stands so tall and compressed feeling, because the low end is boosted on there. He's reducing the low end. He's actually not boosting that much low end because he's hearing it with so much more. And then on speakers, that shit goes because there's not that much low end, and it sounds so big, loud, and tall. I mean, I wonder, I wonder if that has anything to do with like the choices that are made, because
really
the beats are really strange in the low end. There's a weird bump.
On the chat what headphones does Skrillex use. This was like a decade ago, and I saw him using those, and I think he talked about, I'm sure things are very different now. He's doing all kinds of different stuff. And
I mean, those Beats Studios were in every video that he posted.
Maybe the greatest audio marketing.
And he had barefoot speakers at the time when he was in this, whenever he was in the studio. But rumor has it that was all headphones.
Talent is more important than all the other stuff. Okay, let's see. So somebody asked this question. I talked to Tizio about it. I talked to you about it briefly. A few folks. The question was from ODK: why are people selling their unfair childs? Now, I don't know that everybody's doing that. It seems like both you and Tizio have either just gone to the DW Fern stuff because you. What is the reason for you? Or I don't think it's like a general thing where people are like, oh, I don't like unfair childs anymore. It's a great box. It's a great piece of equipment.
No, it's amazing. I would keep it if I was recording more. Recallability. I'm just minimizing all the things that I have to recall. Like everything that I keep is something I don't ever touch the knobs on, really. And I found myself needing to touch the knobs a lot in Unfair Child and change things per song. And I don't want to recall. I'm lazy. So, and the amount of songs that I'm working on at one time, albums at one time, it just gets annoying for me. And I'm sorry if people hate on that, because I'd rather put my energy.
It doesn't work as part of your workflow.
I think it sounds amazing. I think
your workflow, it's a little,
doesn't work as part of my workflow anymore. I think it's great. I just think that the VT7, that Fern VT7 box, gives me a little bit more of what I want aesthetically, let's say on vocals. I put it mostly on vocals. A lot of people say that they love the Unfair Child on vocals. That's great. Like, I think it would sound great on vocals too. I don't need two compressors on my vocal bus.
You have a single vocal chain that you, or like options of, the idea of having two subtly different, many thousands of dollars tube compressor, you probably just need one.
Look, at the end of the day, it's what you just said. Let's just double down on it's about workflow. It doesn't work in my workflow. And I think it's great. And someone else that would use it more should have a box like that, because they're really rare. They're all handmade. They're hard to find. They're expensive. It should be in the hands of someone that's going to use it more than I would.
I feel like I don't know if I DM with Tizio. I don't want to put words in his mouth, but I think it was a similar thing. He's like, I've got this other thing that does a similar thing, and I'm not really using it. And so might as well get off to somebody that will use it.
Yeah.
Man, there's two like really big topics. Maybe I'll just let's do this slightly.
Let's do a big topic,
lesser one first, and we can just talk through it briefly, because we get this question a lot about. This is from Casey. I think it was on the Discord. Any tips or methods to work with or around labels taking forever to pay and the lawyers taking forever to review paperwork? Seems like a problem across the board. The short answer is yeah. That's nobody ever wants to pay quickly. I mean, by the way, if somebody who you work with consistently pays you quickly and consistently, go out of your way to do more work for them. That's a really great thing. And if you're watching this and you're the type of person that hires other people, see if you can get them paid quickly. They will want to work harder for you. I mean, so for people that don't know, that sort of aren't at that level of the consistent work, that generally how these things work is that as soon as you agree to a gig and agree to terms, generally you will get half of the money up front and then half of the money when everything is delivered, all the files, all of the stems, all of the whatever you need to deliver and whatever your role is, plus all the paperwork is done and deals are signed. And oftentimes that second thing can take a long time. I actually just got from my attorneys a thing to sign for a couple of songs I produced 5 years ago is when I produced the first one. And this is a major label UK, but I think it's like the artist and had a new lawyer, and then they switched with this, and then they did, who knows? My attorneys are.
Yeah, that just happened to me for someone 2.5 years ago. I mean, the artist decided to put the song out. This is one of the challenges. It's coming out soon.
Doing what we do for a living is that you do not have a regular paycheck. If you made a bunch of money these couple of months, you may not get any new money the next 6 months, even if you're working, even if you're getting hired. Financial management is a is a very underrated part of what we do, even as you get into quote unquote having success, being hired consistently, that sort of thing. You even talked about it this year. Part of your experiment was like, I need to try some things financially and see what that's like, because this is a thing we got to think about, is how are we going to get paid, and when do we get paid, and how do you have enough money? And it's a complicated topic. I mean, to answer Casey's question, how do you make things go quicker? Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how you make things go quicker.
I don't know if you do, right? Because I think I never want to be the reason why a project is held up. So if someone is stoked to get to work, and I've worked with them before, like we talked about this, like I think if it's a completely new team and you've never worked together before, like maybe have the conversation first about rate. Obviously, if it's someone you've worked with, like let's just get going, and then like my manager will sort it out because they already kind of know what to expect. I think when it comes to getting paid and releasing files, I don't know. I'm at a point where I don't want to hold up projects, and I want to get, because someone else will get called for the thing to release the work before the payment. And maybe that's just, bad economics. But I think this whole industry is based off of bad economics.
All ends of those spectrums. And I was talking about my buddy Moon, who's managed by my friend Tyler, who I've known for a decade, and we've had hits together. He was an A&R, now he's a manager. If he calls me, I go, send me the files, I'll start working. If Moon hits me up and says, you want to work on this thing? I go, send me the files. I do the same with him. I sent him something a week or two ago. It's like, I got this thing, and I did all the prefacing, like, it's a demo, don't know, big artist, this person, do you want to jump in? He's like, send it to me. We'll figure it out. Because we're just building enough. This is another reason, as we said before, make records with people consistently, make records with your friends. It's also why the people at the high level who you can also make things sound just as good as, that's why they keep getting hired. It's because the consistency of you do the work, everybody gets paid, you go out on a good note. Like, these things are really, really important. So I have that flow with certain people. And then there's other people, there's people I just won't work with because they haven't paid me in the past. And there's other people that's like, cool, I will send files, I will send you stems once everything is in place, and my manager says we're good to go, or my attorney says we're good to go, or the deal is signed, or sometimes the money lands in my account. Not you send me a screenshot of the transfer, but when my bank says it's in my account, then you get files. Because that, and that's a very, very rare thing, because again, you don't want to be the person that's holding things up. But if this is a situation that you get yourself into where these people don't pay that much, sometimes you got to do that too. And the fucked up answer is, it never stops with this. The whole career is dealing with these things, and there's no great way to do it, because you don't want to be the person that just says, great, I'm down to work with you, call my manager, get it. Because if you're that person, then you're not ever going to work. But if you're also just like, I'll do whatever, and then your business people are like, you got to stop just saying yes and doing all the work before we can. And it's a dance,
Well, you lose some leverage, and I understand that manager conversation, and that I get that. But at the same time, I have so many living examples of this. Like I'm 14 songs deep on an 18 song album. I haven't gotten paid $1. My manager and the artist manager are talking. We just came up with a deal yesterday that we agreed upon, and no one's trying to take advantage of the fact that I'm 13, 14 songs deep. Like, the deal's very fair. It's a team I've worked with before, and I'm glad I started earlier. We wanted to finish it last year. It didn't wind up happening, but we're in today, and hopefully finish it this month. Like, I just wanted to work on it, and that's cool. And on another positive side, I did something for Columbia in December, and the break happened, and I got my contract yesterday to sign, like, from the artist for 2 songs. Like, it happened pretty fast. Within a month is pretty good. Like, that's as good as it's going to get. So that balances out with things that, like, took 5 years. Maybe the artist didn't know that they were going to put it out. Maybe they got dropped from the record label and hired and signed to another label. And that happens a lot. Like, if we want to be a part, I think that really what it is, if we want to be a part of an artist's story, we have to be malleable to the artist's story. Like, you can put your foot down and you can say, I only work for this. Like, maybe it's a recording engineer concept. This makes more sense. Like, I have a day rate, and I provide for my family on this day rate. It's an expectation I have. So I know that if I work 20 to 30 days in a month, I bring home this much for my family. We live in Highland Park. This is my mortgage. and that's it, and that's what I need. And then maybe something blows up and you have a royalty at that point, and then you can survive off that. But you have 3 kids and you need this, like that. That's one version of it. And then the other version is you're finishing records like you're involved, where maybe you're not getting hired to mix it like I am. I'm probably in the middle of these 2 examples. And you're like, oh, I believe in this. This song's tight. This artist is tight. This writer's tight. It's going this way. I want to do this. And then maybe in a year from now, I'll get paid for this. And you can afford that lifestyle because you've had hits with Martin Garrix, with One Direction. Like you've paved this way so you can be more malleable to do that. But you were malleable in the circumstance to get to where you are now. By doing that, you haven't changed your business model, right? So the engineer that is doing that day rate, that's the comfort zone business model for them, and it works. And I think that is admirable and one way to do it. And then your version is the other way. And I don't really know if there's that much gray area in between. And I don't think there's less anxiety from either of those
I think
business
it's also
models.
an important thing for people to internalize, that we all feel like we should get paid and credited and compensated in any other way for 100% of the things we work on, but that's not how things work. So the idea that if you get less than 100% of all the things you're trying to achieve when you get involved with something, you got to step away from that expectation. You should go for it as though, it's like strive for perfection, but don't be disappointed when you don't get there, because by the way, you'll never get there. Those are important things to internalize. I remind myself of that a lot. I mean, there have been, I won't get into the details of it, but there's a project recently which I invested a lot of time in that I had a bunch of expectations, and it didn't end up panning out the way I wanted. And hugely disappointed, emotionally disappointing, because a big part of me getting involved with projects, I'm not just mixing, I'm getting together with the artists, we're writing things, we're trying to build an emotional relationship to make great art from scratch, and you get invested emotionally. We all get invested emotionally, even if you're a mastering engineer, but when those things don't go, it's fucking crushing sometimes. But also those things often come back around. It's like you said, you're working on album 3 for an artist that you feel like you got cut out of album 2 because you worked on album 1, but you just keep moving forward and doing what you can.
I don't hold any resentment, or is it the choice to go elsewhere makes sense when you have more access to budgets, and you've heard this person has done this album that you love, right? Like that's the thing that I come back to when I lose, for example. Either lose like, hey, I did a mix and so did Serban or so did Manny, and they chose that one over mine for whatever reason. I can be crushed and wrap my head around that and ruminate on that for weeks, months, whatever, till I'm a newborn child again. I just don't know how beneficial that is to my life when I have access to hundreds of artists to work on. And as an artist, they have one artist to work on, and they know that Manny did that album that they love, and they hope that Manny's work will make their album sound as good as that album. They maybe are missing the all the other moving pieces in between to some extent on how it sounded before that person touched it, but they have magical ears, these people that have been around for 3-4 decades. Like, I understand why you would go elsewhere. I do think, though, that a lot of the younger engineers, me included, have more time and access more personally to a lot of up-and-coming artists that maybe aren't A-list. So I think that there is a reason why I take that thing personally, because I might feel like I care more. I don't know that for a fact, but I do feel like a lot of us in the younger generation care. Like, a lot of love. I could just move on to another mix today, but I went back in time because that's the way I want to invest in the artists that I work with. But I think the story of that person did that person did that. I know this came, the first question was about like the main question was about, getting paid and all that. But I really think that is a secondary aspect to doing your best work. And either way, you should get compensated financially. I do think we live in some sort of like false economic, industry that causes more anxiety than, than we might need. But really, if you do it for the love and you do it with the right artists that trust, value, and hold you in as high of a regard, maybe as you hold them to a degree, that there's so much more fulfilling outcomes that by the time you get paid, you forgot that you weren't paid. And it just feels like a gift. Because like maybe some months you have to, eat cold cuts from the fridge. And some months you get to go out and have some fucking salmon on top of a salad or whatever, like, gets your protein count in. I think that all of that to say that there's so many ways to come at the feeling of fulfillment from what we do, that should be the number one driver. And I think that's what I would love, like this episode to, based on what we've just to round out all the things that we've touched on today so far. I think from that strategy experiment that I did all the way to like not getting paid, to losing projects, to other people that have a wider experience net than I or others like me have. It's really about what fulfills you mostly, and we should just do more of that. I have so many more, because the perspective outwardly, right? Because we have Instagram and we have these posts and Billboard charts and certifications, and now with Jaxsta and Museo.ai, they're like showing off all the things that our peers are doing. It's like I'm going to just speak for myself. Last year and already this year, I have more losses than wins. Now I have some big wins, but I have so many more losses than wins based on this competition that exists in our industry with my elders. I've talked to some very successful producer friends of mine that also have experienced loss at a similar level to me recently, that have given me peace of mind and offered me this new perspective I entered the conversation with, which I'm not lying about, because like we all lose. The same song can be offered to 6 different A-list producers or producer groups, and one gets it, right? So maybe sometimes 2 or 3 mixers are mixing a song, and I'm so thankful to be in the conversation. Do I want mine to win and emotionally connect to the artist more? But maybe I was a dB quieter and they were listening on shitty speakers, and they were on a plane without the noise canceling on, and there was rumble, and whatever the experience is, if that's gonna be what we rely on for our happiness and fulfillment, it's not really sustainable. And I've been spending way too much time thinking the opposite.
We've referenced it before, and I don't want to throw anyone under the bus, but a very successful, hugely successful songwriter on another very listened to music industry related podcast. I remember listening to them talk about, they had tons of number ones, and I think a lot of songwriters would, and this applies to everybody doing whatever they're doing, a lot of songwriters would be like, damn, I would love to have this person's career and have all the success. And you could just hear the anxiety in their voice as they talked about not currently having the number one and wanting more number ones, and they just did not seem happy. And it's a hard perspective to have when you're not there. I have not been there with multiple number ones and all of that, but you can just tell that it applies to everything with like status games. If you are trying to beat the person at the top or try to get to the top, and that is your goal, you will end up disappointed, because even if you get to the top, then everybody else is coming for your heels and you're just in that place all the time. We've got to remember that we're making music, we're making art, we're trying to pursue this thing that we started to love before we knew anything about the music industry and about money. And it doesn't mean that you should reject all that stuff, because it's great to be able to make a living or be on your way to making a living or make a little bit of money or whatever. But man, if you get into the competitive part of it, you are going to be bummed out no matter where you go. You'll have moments of elation when you quote unquote win, but every time you don't get a gig, if it feels like a loss, that's your fault, because you're basically not going to get the 99% of gigs, because lots of people work out there and lots of people make stuff. So you got to, I tell myself this too, we talk about this stuff a lot. Everybody goes through it, but like if you're chasing charts and numbers and the big projects and all that, you're going to be disappointed by it. Doesn't mean you shouldn't chase those things, but if that's what you value above everything else, you're going to be bummed out. I promise. There was some, yeah.
I get bummed out a lot. I'm very easily bummed out.
Well,
I'm no different than anybody.
One thing that was asked a couple of weeks ago, which we didn't get to, and then it was just reminded, and a few people on the Discord are like, yeah, we'd love that. Ross asked, it's kind of a long one, and there's a sort of simple way to answer it, and then we can do the sort of longer way. Ross asked, what are your most regretted professional fuck-ups so far? What happened? Did it set you back? How did you recover, regain confidence, navigate after missed opportunities? What did you learn? How would you do it differently now? I mean, we just answered a bunch of that question I think on the emotional side, but on the sort of simple practical side, I've lost full songs before. I've lost, I've done like fuck up logistical things. Everybody get a good backup system. That's like the number one thing that I've learned from like, I lost a full song for an artist. I lost a couple of things early on. There's things like that. But in terms of like professional fuck ups, I think of fuck ups as like etiquette or logistical, and you just go, oh, I should have a backup system. Oh, I shouldn't plug this into that, or I shouldn't do this before that. Those things are, I mean, there's more of those, I'm sure, but I don't really think about them because once you learn.
I have a very specific one. Oh, saying no to mixing Dijon's debut album because they didn't have my budget. That goes into this entire conversation of like why I started. Man, I was just so busy, and it was after Khalid's success, and I was just,
you were like, I was
killing it. I was busy, and things were paying my rate, and I fucked with the music. I thought he was amazing, and I was just like, I don't know what I was working at the time. It wasn't a personal thing. It was just like, too busy. They don't have my budget. Got to say no. And I normally would have just said yes and like figured it out. I honestly don't remember the exact, but I regret that so much. I think he is one of the coolest artists. I think I would have had access to a different like left-leaning genre of work that would fulfill my art brain a little bit more consistently from having that credit. And I would have enjoyed that experience mixing that project and maybe the next album that was fucking mind-blowingly good. And they were basically trying to find a mixer to invest in for long term, and I said no, and I regret it. And it's the only artist that I regret saying no to. And I think about it pretty regularly. I love
pushed you in the direction of, as we talked about earlier, doing things that seem interesting and that you love, and not putting them away. There's obviously a lot of value in defending rates and defending the value of a mixer and that sort of thing. But we're in this to make great art and be involved with great projects. I'm trying to think if
I also had mixer friends of mine reach out to me and say, I wish you mixed Dijon. And I was like, me too. You know what I mean? It was like it to me, and whoever reached out, probably his manager to my manager, they knew it was the right fit, right? You can almost like, I know I made a mistake. It's not like I said no to an artist, they became a number one artist, and I regret it because of success. I regret it because of how it could have sounded, and the level I could have unlocked as well for the artistry. That I think it sounds cool and interesting, and it's obviously done its thing, and everyone that I know loves the way it came out. I just think that I was onto something in that genre, and I was the right fit. So I probably disappointed without people knowing. I disappointed myself, and
I want to answer another part of this question too, because it's what are your professional fuck ups? What happened? How did it set you back? But I like the part of the question, how did you recover, regain confidence, navigate after missed opportunities? I think that's a really interesting topic. I feel like that happens to me a lot more because I've been in with tons of artists that have then blown up. Some of them I've made those records with. Some of them, when somebody like, I won't name names, but when some artist comes around and is doing the rounds and then they have a big hit, they've probably written 40 or 50 songs with people like me, and one of those songs becomes the song, and you kind of go, I didn't unlock it. And that doesn't, that's just the luck of the draw, and maybe I could have been better prepared, but mostly it's just they didn't figure it out yet, or it wasn't the right day, or whatever. There's also lots of other things, like I referenced earlier, of projects you get really invested in and then they don't pan out and you get really bummed. I find for me, the best way to recover, regain confidence, that sort of thing, is just by making more stuff. There's that great Neil Gaiman commencement speech that I talk about all the time, where he just talks about make good art. And it's make good art in the good times and the bad times. If you're bummed out, you have no direction, just go make things. It's the same with like Stephen King in his book on writing. It's just like, have a schedule and just go do things and go make things, and don't worry about the results. The Naval quote: be impatient with action, be patient with results. If you're in a bad place and you don't feel like you're any good and you feel like you fucked something up, just go make more stuff, because fundamentally that's what makes us do this for a living, or on our way to making a living, is the fact that this is a thing that you do. If your idea of yourself is, I'm a creative person, that can't supersede the thing that creative people do, which is you just make stuff. I wrote last night, I had an hour and my brain was a little fried, my ears were a little fried. And I was talking to an artist friend of mine, a visual artist, and I was just getting psyched on the idea of being a creative person. So I just wrote a song at like 10 at night, from 10 to 11, just played some chords, put up my 67, loved the way it sounds, just sang some things, wrote a song, wrote a lyric, wrote a verse, a pre and a chorus, a quick little track, got it done. Probably will never listen to it again, but just the process of making stuff. And that's a fulfilling, this is what I do. I love doing this. It doesn't have to go anywhere. It doesn't have to be anything, but it's just, you make stuff. That's what we do. And you
journal for yourself, right? You write. I now do a piano thing also session for yourself.
Start the day with music. I just do scales. I think I posted on my Instagram. Yes.
It's for yourself. If for some reason something then clicks over in your brain to, I should share this, that's great. But we should always be doing something artistic for ourselves. I think that's a really valuable point to reiterate that you just said. Like, that's really what it's all about. If you have a loss, do better on the next thing. Do better on the things that you have access to. You might not think it's the next big thing. You never know what the next best thing is. Nobody does that's involved. So just let that feed what you're actually working on, what you're actually touching. And that might be something you're doing alone, just like Matt's doing every morning. I think that's really beautiful. And I think that's really all that's going to turn into the big thing anyway.
That's one of
the most authentic, at least.
If you're tired or sad or don't feel like you're good, that's actually the best time to be making things and not worrying about if what you're making is good, because you want to stay in that creative momentum. You want to stay in that space where you're doing things, because then a day later, a week later, a month later, when you come out of whatever funk or whatever, and somebody says, hey, I love that thing you did a year ago. Do you want to work on this? You'll be in the process of making things. Your ears will be good. You'll be in a good space. You'll be connected to your voice and your lyrics or your mixing or your high end, whatever it is. You'll be in that space. Even though the previous month you've been working on things, you haven't liked anything, you've been bummed out, you don't feel like you're any good. Just continuing to be in that, it's sort of like put in the reps in, being in the gym. Like if you're an athlete, you just stay in the gym, even if it's, you just stay in that space. So then when the opportunities come around, you're ready for them. All right, we've done about an hour.
And on that note,
great to see you, my friend. I'm glad you got internet.
Love that.
Love you, and
you too. Glad you're feeling better, and we can actually do dinner again.
We got to do it. I'm ready. Talk soon, bud.
Yeah, can't wait.